Okay, waiting for a few folks to join. Good evening.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Okay. Just going to wait for a couple more folks to join, maybe give it another minute or so. See, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We actually have a quorum. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 6:01 right now. So calling meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Albana.
Yes, may I ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Commissioner Albana. Right, next item, public roll call. Ms. Medina.
Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I will now take attendance. Commissioner Albana,
Present.
Commissioner Awasti,
Present.
thank you. Chair Chuan,
Present.
Vice Chair Ciardella.
Present.
I don't see Commissioner Galong. So Commissioner Medina Ashby. And she is present. Thank you.
Yes, present. Sorry, having technical difficulties.
Okay. Thank you. All right, next item is public forum. Those interested are invited to address Planning Commission on any subject not on tonight's agenda, orally via Zoom webinar, instructions above. Speakers may provide their name and city of residence for the recording secretary's record, and comments may be limited to 3 minutes or less. As an item not listed on the agenda, no response is required from city staff or the Planning Commission, and no further action can be taken. Planning Commission may instruct the staff to place the item on a future meeting agenda. So let's see, at this time, Ms. Medina, do we have anyone wanting to speak in public forum?
Yes, we do, Chair. We have Indrajit Mundra.
Okay.
I will give her, oh, hold on, let me see. Participants. I'm gonna allow her to talk.
Okay.
She can unmute herself now.
Indrajit Mundra, you have welcome to the Planning Commission. You have 3 minutes.
Chair Chuan,
Honored commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here. I am the vice president at the Milpitas Chamber, and I would like to open up the possibility that if the if the Planning Commission needs any help to advertise any events or anything, that the chamber is there to allow access to all of the communications channels that the chamber has put in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bundra. Okay. Ms. Medina, any other speakers for public forum? Oh, Ms. Medina, are you on mute? No. We still can't hear you.
Oh, heavens. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, this is like a double mute. So there are no other community members in the queue for public comment, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Medina. Next item, new business. Planning Director.
I do not have any new business tonight.
Okay.
Or-
So the new business item is the Planning Commissioner training.
I'm sorry, I thought we were on announcements, so I was.
Yeah, there's no announcements on the agenda. However, if it's allowed there, I believe it should be fine. Is that correct, City Attorney? If we have any announcements under new business?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Director Thomas.
All right, before we jump into, we do have a couple of presentations tonight. Before we do that, I did want to make an announcement, kind of on a personal note. Our attorney, Mr. De Los Angeles, is a new father, and I just thought everybody would want to congratulate him. I don't mean to put him on the spot or embarrass him, but it's my understanding he has a new son, and we're happy that you could join us tonight. We're sorry that please give our apologies to your wife for taking you away from her, but congratulations.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed your
All right, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, he just got out of the hospital today, so
Wow.
we're all at home now.
That's dedication, right?
What's his name?
Leo.
Leo. Oh, how
Yeah.
nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
Good.
All right.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks,
not too
thanks.
much sleep tonight, I'll bet you.
No, I haven't slept in a couple of days, but
Okay. Well, congratulations.
thanks, Chair.
All right. There's no other announcements, Planning Director. I'm going to hand it over to you for the Planning Commissioner training.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Planning Commissioners tonight, as you saw on our agenda, it's a little bit different than our usual meetings. We do not have any development projects to review, so I thought we would take the opportunity to do our annual review of the Brown Act. And then because we have several new members, and again, I just think it's good practice every year to maybe take a look at our Commission Handbook, Citywide Commission Handbook, as well as the Planning Commission Bylaws. So we'll be looking at both of those tonight. I think it will be a relatively short meeting. We will try to keep our comments or our presentations brief, but we welcome any questions or comments that you may have on any of these documents. So we'll start with our attorney, Martin De Los Angeles, with the Brown Act, and then I'll follow up with just an overview of the handbook and the bylaws. I'll turn the time over to Martin.
Thanks, Ned. So good evening, commissioners. So tonight I'll just go over the Brown Act, which is California's open meeting law. And so I know most of you have gone through some form of this kind of training before, but for the newer commissioners, this is intended to cover some of the major requirements of the Brown Act, particularly as they apply to the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. So the Brown Act, as I mentioned, is California's sunshine law for local governments. And so the overall purpose of the Brown Act is to promote transparency and to ensure the public's right to participate in meetings of local legislative bodies. Next slide, please. So the provisions of the Brown Act are codified in the California Government Code, beginning with section 54950. And of particular mention is that the act specifically requires that all meetings of legislative bodies be open and public, and that members of the public have the right to attend these meetings. Next slide, please. And in addition to the Brown Act, the city has enacted its own open government ordinance, which essentially tracks the requirements of the Brown Act, but it contains a few differences, which I'll get to in a moment. What's important to remember for our purposes is that the Planning Commission is required to comply with both the Brown Act and the Milpitas Open Government Ordinance. And in the event both requirements conflict, the more stringent one that results in greater public access will apply. Next slide, please. And so to whom does the Brown Act apply? So under state law, the Brown Act applies to legislative bodies of local agencies. And so this is defined to include the governing body of a local agency, which in this case would be the city council, and then any commissions, committees, boards, or other bodies of the local agency. So in this case, the Planning Commission. Our open government ordinance differs slightly in that it says that all policy bodies of the city are required to comply with the Brown Act. And so this is actually more stringent or more inclusive, as it includes other bodies like even ad hoc committees. Certain bodies that are created are not subject to the Brown Act, but under our Milpitas ordinance, we've set that requirement for those kinds of bodies. So it doesn't really apply to the Planning Commission itself, but if the Planning Commission did ever want to consider, setting up subcommittees, then yeah, those things would generally apply under our ordinance. Next slide, please. And so what is a meeting under the Brown Act? The definition of a meeting under the Brown Act is very broad. And so that covers almost any gathering of a majority of members to hear or discuss any item of agency business or potential agency business. So generally, conversations between commissioners about any issues before the Planning Commission would be sufficient to constitute a meeting. No action needs to be taken for a meeting to occur. And so a meeting can include any use of direct communication, intermediaries, or technological devices such as email. And what the Brown Act prohibits is when a series of those individual contacts sort of results in what we call a serial meeting. And that's defined as a series of separate communications that ultimately involves a majority of a legislative body. And so the Brown Act prohibits this type of communication if it actually results in the development of an agreement among the majority of any particular item. So in this case, we have 7 members. And so if outside of a publicly noticed meeting, 4 members happen to reach some kind of a consensus on a pending item, then that would constitute a violation of the Brown Act. So again, oh, sorry, I think just if we could just stay in the same slide. So yeah, serial meetings, they commonly occur when one member contacts another to discuss business, and the second member contacts a third to discuss that, and so on. And that results in, if that results in 4 or more commissioners discussing an item that's before the Planning Commission, then that would constitute a serial meeting. And another way that can occur is when a staff member kind of acts as a hub and communicates with the majority of members one by one for discussion, deliberation, or a decision on any action. And so even though commissioners may be communicating to staff, if staff is in essence communicating that to a majority of members outside of a meeting, that's when that could also be a problem. And so given this risk, commissioners should always be cautious of communicating by telephone, emails, or social media with other members on matters that are pending before the commission. So some general tips to keep in mind are refrain from replying all to emails. Try not to communicate your position or make a commitment on a pending matter to other members. And when in doubt, if commissioners have a question regarding an agenda item, send the email to planning staff instead of forwarding it to members directly. Next slide, please. And so for agenda requirements, you'll notice that an agenda is posted before every meeting of the Planning Commission. And so an agenda must be posted at least 72 hours in advance for regular meetings. And in this case, which is a special meeting, it needs to be posted 24 hours in advance. And agendas must contain a brief general description of each item of business that's going to be discussed at the meeting. And it also needs to include the time and the location of the meeting. Next slide, please. So as a general rule, no action or discussion may occur on items or subjects that are not listed on an agenda. However, members can make certain actions that if the agenda does not require, if it does not contain a certain item, they can still make a brief announcement. They can make a brief report on activities. They can ask staff clarifying questions. They can provide a reference to staff or other sources for other information. They could direct staff to bring back an item at a subsequent meeting. So those are the limited ways that discussions on non-agenda items can take place. Next slide, please. And finally, violations of the Brown Act can be significant, and they include civil and criminal misdemeanor penalties, injunctions, and most commonly, they result in the invalidation of decisions. So anytime there is a violation of the Brown Act, the decision that's made by the Planning Commission, or if it's a city council decision, those things are invalidated by the courts. And so that results in not only costly litigation, but a lot of time that staff might spend preparing a project for approval. It would mandate corrections or invalidations of the actions. So yeah, that's my presentation. And in the event that you have any questions or concerns regarding anything we've covered, please feel free to contact the City Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, City Attorney. Okay, next is Planning Director. Planning Director, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know if there were any comments or questions on Brown Act. I think most of you have heard that several times over. I think it's pretty straightforward. Just do all of the business is done in the public eye, and we try to be as transparent as possible and do things above board. So I will jump in. Oh, Commissioner Ciardella.
Yeah, I just have a comment. When a developer calls you and said, hey, I'd like to talk about the project, and I go ahead and meet with them, and we have 3 other commissioners that meet with them, is that okay? That we didn't know about.
That's a great question. So the Brown Act, it does not prohibit one-on-one communications with a non-member, so like a developer. So yeah, one-on-ones are fine. But what's not allowed is the sharing of views, comments, or concerns by different members. So if the developer meets with you, Commissioner, but they also meet with 2 other commissioners, that's fine if it's a one-on-one and commissioners are not discussing what was discussed. They're not sharing their viewpoints with other commissioners following that meeting. Normally, you would also disclose at the open meeting that you met with the developer, and which we do. So that's fine.
And to follow up on that, I've met with developers over the years, and they'll kind of ask you for your support, and I just tell them that, hey, I have to listen to what everybody else has got to say, and staff and everything else. So that's how I kind of get away with it, I guess. In other words, I don't say, hey, I'm going to vote for that. That's a great project. I don't do that.
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah, it's always, you should not commit to a position until it's heard, and you shouldn't commit to or tell anyone that you're going to commit to a position. It's going to be heard by the whole body, and yeah, it sounds like that's correct what you're doing.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Liz, when you pull up sorry, Chair Chuan.
Yeah, just one quick question, and maybe, I know the answer, but probably good to just hear from the city attorney. Can all 7 commissioners all meet for a social gathering?
Good question.
That's another good question. So there's limited exceptions to what constitute a meeting, and so a social gathering is one of them. If it's, as long as we're not discussing city business, planning commission business, if it's strictly for like a social function, that falls into one of the exceptions.
Okay, great. All right, back over to you, Planning Director.
Great, thank you very much. So as I mentioned at the top of my comments, well, I'm going to go over the citywide commissioners handbook that was put together a few years ago to bring some consistency to how all of the various city commissions operate. And then we'll talk specifically about the planning commission bylaws. But could we have the next slide, please? So the planning commission, as you all know, has some very specific duties and responsibilities. I think it's safe to say for all of the commissions in the city that everyone is seeking to implement the council policies and priorities as described in some of the documents that we'll talk about. The planning commission has a specific duty over land use and planning permits, and that, but even to say just land use, that's pretty broad, because as you know, in our meetings, we touch upon all kinds of different topics, everything from public safety to, we do a lot of child care centers. There's some safety issues related to that, and design and traffic, and we get into parking. So lots of different topics fall under the purview of the planning commission. But you do have several tools that are very important that help you along the way. Of course, every staff report that you see will have some mention of the general plan. So the city has a new general plan that was just adopted last year, and it's quite up to date. We also have the 2 specific plans, one in the metro area around the transit station, and the other along Main Street and the Calaveras corridor. And Milpitas, or the Milpitas metro specific plan, is being updated as we speak, and we'll hopefully bring that to you sometime, likely in August timeframe, for review and a recommendation to the council. And then we just kicked off an update to what's currently called the Midtown Plan, and will be renamed the Main Street Gateway, or the Gateway Main Street Plan. And so we'll be working on that and hope to have lots of input from the Planning Commission as we continue that effort. Of course, the primary implementation tool of the general plan is the zoning ordinance. Our ordinance in Milpitas works well, but it is somewhat outdated. And we hope that by the end of the year, we'll be able to kick off an update to the zoning ordinance as well. That's a pretty heavy undertaking. It will likely take about a year to go completely through the zoning ordinance and update all of it. All the stuff that works well, the basic zoning districts and setbacks and height limits, most of that will stay the same. But there are some areas where we may want to look at doing things a little bit differently. A lot of cities have added in chapters or provisions within their zoning ordinance to ensure sustainability or resilience, as we say, in the face of climate change. And that, that would, as an example, that would manifest itself in the zoning ordinance with regulations around building in fire zones or seismic areas. If we don't have a shoreline here, but if we had a shoreline, it might look at things like sea level rise and that sort of thing. So that's yet another very large project, large undertaking. The Planning Commission will like to have lots of feedback from the Planning Commission on that. And then, of course, in each of our meetings, we're typically looking at development permit applications. This is kind of the bread and butter of the Planning Commission bill. I've got SDP as site development permit and CUP, conditional use permit. And those are usually the types of applications that we bring to the commission. From time to time, we'll have development projects that require an amendment to the general plan or an amendment to the zoning ordinance. We will have a few of those coming up in the next little while, and those all come to the Planning Commission as well. And as you've seen as we go along, some items like a conditional use permit come to the Planning Commission for a final decision. So this planning body is empowered under the City Council to make some decisions that are final. They can of course always be appealed to the City Council, but I differentiate those from the items on which the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the council, and the council has the final decision-making authority. So all of that is determined or directed, established in the zoning ordinance. But I do believe, there, as we'll see in a moment, there are 12 commissions within the city on all different kinds of topics, from veterans to youth to senior citizens, traffic and economic development, different topics. And some of you have served on those other commissions, but by and large, those commissions are strictly making recommendations to the council on different topics or coming up with programs. And the Planning Commission, to my knowledge, is the one commission that is empowered to make really quasi judicial decisions and final decisions on land use matters. And then, of course, larger projects will have attached them environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. And all of our staff reports that come before you will have some citation in there regarding CEQA. And then finally, from time to time, we do bring tentative maps to the commission. I think our last meeting, we had the tentative map that was being prepared for the Sunny Hills neighborhood. It was for that community facilities district. And we don't, because Milpitas is largely built out, we don't see a lot of very large tentative maps that are creating subdivisions, for example. We did, within my time here, we did have one when Robeson Homes came forward with the project that's under construction up on North Park, Victoria, and they were splitting that large, it was a large vacant parcel, and they were splitting it into about 30 lots. So that in that case, they bring the tentative map to the Planning Commission. It's tentative because they're showing us how the lots will be shaped and how many will be there, and then that's followed up by what's called a final map. And the final map is the one that is recorded with the county recorder, and that's what determines things like tax assessments and land ownership and deeds and that sort of thing. So just a variety of very interesting applications come before the Planning Commission. Can we take the next slide, please? And the Planning Commission is also distinguished from the 11 other city commissions in that this is the one commission that is required by state law, and it's also set up in the Milpitas Municipal Code. So right there in Title I, Chapter 500, there's a whole section on the Planning Commission. How many members are there on the commission? What are your qualifications? How long do you serve? How are the meetings held and records? And in a very general way, the municipal code itself sets out the organization and the composition and the duties and the powers of the Planning Commission. And also, I keep hoping to increase it, but the Planning Commission also distinguished, and it's the one commission that has a stipend that's attached to it. So you receive a stipend or a compensation for each of the meetings that you attend, and that's different from all of the other commissions as well. And it's kind of related to what I said earlier about this is the one commission that's making decisions that are binding decisions. And so the council, in years past, found that it was appropriate for the planning commissioner to be compensated for the work that you do here on the commission. Next slide, please. So we'll take a little look at the Commissioner's Handbook, and sorry I was a little tardy sending out my email this afternoon, but I wanted everybody to have a copy, an updated copy of the handbook and the bylaws. So this says it was adopted in 2018. It was as recently as last January 2021, the council made some additional changes to the Commissioner's Handbook. Before 2018, it hadn't been updated for a long time, and so it was a little outdated, and there was a desire among the council members at that time to standardize all the rules of the commissions for consistency. Now, I don't know if the other commissions also have bylaws. I know the Planning Commission does, and the bylaws are, specific to the Planning Commission, lay out some of the are specific to some of the work that you do. But this Commissioner's Handbook is more general, and it's there's quite a bit of overlap between my previous slide when I talked about the outline or the structure of the Planning Commission in the municipal code, and then the next layer down you have this Commissioner's Handbook, and there's some rules and different guidelines there, and then there's the bylaws, and there's a bit of overlap among all of them, particularly in regard to things like attendance and participation. But to my knowledge, they are all consistent with one another where there is overlap. The one thing the Commissioner's Handbook talks about that's kind of interesting is this last bullet point about each commission having an annual work plan and a budget. And you may recall that I will usually bring that to you. It usually comes sometime in the fall, late fall, maybe as late as even November, December. And the Planning Commission's work plan is pretty much always the same, that we talk about that we're going to have regular meetings and that we're going to review development review applications. Now, we don't know at any given time what kind of a development application will come in the door. And so we can't say specifically this year we're going, as a goal, for example, we're going to do 8 site development permits and 10 conditional use permits. It depends on the private sector, on what's happening in the market, what they bring forward. But we can, in your work plan, talk about things like, as I mentioned in one of my previous slides, the update, the ongoing update to the Metro Plan and the ongoing update to the Gateway Plan and the zoning ordinance update. So as those types of very large long-range planning projects come forward, we will add those to the Planning Commission work plan so that the council is aware of it. And those work plans do go to the council and they are reviewed and approved by the council. We do have a budget for the commission. Our budget is the budget for this commission is really combined with our departmental budget, and it covers things like training. And if and when we're able to meet again, this type of a meeting, a special meeting, we likely would have had a light snacks and drinks, but we're a little bit restricted online, so you'll just have to make your own snacks for tonight. I think that's everything for that slide. Can we have the next slide, please? And there's a few more things about the handbook. Again, just things that the council wanted to include that are consistent among all of the 12 commissions. There's usually an annual recognition, some type of a luncheon. We haven't had one in a couple of years, again, because of the pandemic, but that's always fun to get together with the other commissioners, and usually they recognize the members for their years served. And then some of the other commissions, like Citizens Advisory Commission, I think they do activities and events, so they have some fundraising. So the council has provided guidelines around that. And then this ethics and standards, again, there's overlap there with the rules that are in your own bylaws. We've just talked about the Brown Act. The city of Milpitas has its own open government ordinance that mirrors the Brown Act. And then there's some comments about parliamentary procedure. And then this annual conflict of interest form. If you haven't already, the city manager will at some point will be after each one of you for the Form 700, and that's a disclosure on any financial interest that you may have on properties within the city of Milpitas. Any questions on that Commissioner's Handbook? I think, once again, I think it's pretty straightforward, but was going to look. I brought up my copy. Let me see if there was anything that I wanted to mention in particular. I forwarded a copy of this handbook to you prior to the meeting. There's a nice little welcome letter from the mayor there, and then I also like the city overview. It talks about the city and then each of the different commissions, and then in addition to commissions, there's ad hoc task forces and committees that are sometimes formed. I know in the past they've had a budget task force and campaign finance reform committees and those sorts of things. Right now, I think there was recently the homelessness task force in the city presented information to the city council on that topic. So as the need arises, the city, in addition to the 12 standing commissions, the city council will create different ad hoc task forces to help them with different topics. Again, there's some discussion about the different roles of the chair, vice chair, and staff, bylaws and orientation, budget. I was going to see what it said about budget. Oh, actually, I had this in the back of my mind and I wasn't sure. I'm glad that it's here in the handbook. It helps us. So this mentions that the city council allocates $1,000 annually for each commission. These funds, I'm just reading from the handbook, the funds are to be used towards city council approved work plan tasks and projects and administrative costs related to the commission. So if the additional funds are needed for some type of an activity or project, then the commission can return to the council with a stated request for the funds, and that's up to the discretion of the council. So to my knowledge, I don't know that we've ever had a need to use that $1,000 that's allocated annually to the planning commission, but if we find something within the work that we're doing that we need that, then we can always use that. Some rules around attendance. So we'll just go right on ahead to the next slide, please. We're going to jump into the bylaws now, and once again, the bylaws are fairly up to date. They were just updated in 2019. This gives more detail about the selection and the duties and the schedule for the chair and the vice chair, expectations around meeting attendance and what constitutes a quorum. 4 members of the 7-member body constitute a quorum, and business can be conducted. There's some details in there about agendas and minutes, which is kind of interesting. And then a lot of information around meeting conduct, how to make a motion, what voting, let's see, I have this here too. Some of the things that I found interesting. There's all of the act, if you're new on the commission and there's some questions around how the meetings are conducted, it talks about Robert's Rules of Orders, and then opening and closing the public hearing, addressing the commission, and then making a motion. Oh, I know what it was. Martin, I may need your help on this. There are certain types of decisions that require a supermajority vote. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Martin, but do you know which ones are? It's not routine actions, but I think it's things like an amendment to the general plan and an amendment to the zoning ordinance would require a supermajority vote, which is 5 out of 7.
That's correct, Ned. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we have Martin here, or an attorney here every time. And I'll try to catch that too if there's something that comes up and we're voting. The other thing that has come up within the last few years, and some of you will remember when we had a tie vote on one of our issues, and we had to refer to the bylaws to discover that says when either a tie vote or a lack of majority vote occurs, the motion fails. And it was really interesting because it was as I recall, it was a controversial item, and it was a tie vote because one of the commissioners had to recuse themselves. And so we ended up with 6 members. It was 3-3 and the motion failed. So that in cases like that, it's nice to have the rules written down so that we can refer to them. Right after that, the next section is on abstentions, and it does mention, and please keep this in mind, that if a planning commissioner abstains from voting, then the bylaws require that you state a reason for abstaining from that item. And again, Martin, I think when they abstain, it doesn't necessarily mean sometimes I think there's a difference between recusal and abstention. So if they're recusing, then they actually, if we're in the chamber, they would leave the chambers, or they'll turn off their camera in this case of a virtual meeting and not participate in the conversation. But a commissioner may participate in the conversation, and then if they feel like they they can't make a decision, or for whatever, maybe you can help me with rationale there, Martin, then you can abstain from an item. But you would need to state the reason that you're not participating in the vote.
That's correct. So yeah, abstention is basically just a non-vote, but for purposes of the quorum, it's still counted. So unlike recusal, generally, like that would be, if one is recused, the maximum would only be 6. A quorum, if one person abstains, that would, it could be like a 3 yes vote, 2 no vote, 1 abstain, or if it, but for purposes of the quorum, like that's not counted as a no vote, it's just a non-vote. So best way to look at it as the best way to look at an abstention is just that it's a non-vote, but for purposes of the quorum, you're still in there. So
yeah. Thank you. So yeah, lots of good information then about meeting conduct. So I encourage you to look over. It's chapter 6 or part 6 of the bylaw, section 6 of the bylaws. And then section 6 also has some information in there about commissioner conduct. There were just several questions around the Ban Act around ex parte communication, meaning those meetings that you have outside of the regular individual meetings, one-on-one meetings that you might have with the developers, where you're discussing a project out, one-on-one with the developer outside of the meeting. And we usually do this. I think it's very good practice, again, for full transparency, to always disclose if you've met with the developer prior to the meeting and had this type of ex parte communication. If there's also a note in here I thought was interesting about communications with the press. Sometimes the Mercury News, or I don't know, Milpitas Post Milpitas Beat might reach out to you for comment on a project that's coming forward. And the bylaws are really clear. It says, when speaking to the press, commissioners shall clearly state that they are speaking for themselves only and not for the commission as a whole. Because you don't want to get in the position of making it sound like, well, the commission is going to decide this one way or the other. It's better to, clearly state that this is my opinion on the matter, and we have to wait until the meeting to see what the final decision will be after all input has been received, including comments from the public. And the bylaws also mentioned that funding is available. As funding is available, members of the Planning Commission are encouraged to attend the annual League of California Cities Planner Academy, which I know several of you are signed up to go in San Ramon in March. So I hope that is a very good and helpful conference for all of you. And then, the other thing that's important here, and we've talked about this for the new members and orientation about preparation for the meetings. The bylaws state that, and I agree with this, the effectiveness of the Planning Commission requires that commissioners thoroughly prepare themselves for the meeting, carefully review, there's 3 ways of doing it: carefully review the packets, conduct additional research if you need to, and then please feel free to call upon planning staff prior to the meeting for clarification on any of the projects or the materials. And we're always very happy to, I personally am very happy to receive any comments or questions ahead of the meeting. Sometimes some of the questions will require a little bit more research by staff. And so it's always good to know that ahead of time so that we can be prepared in the meeting. And if it's something comes forward and there's information that there's a question from one of the commissioners and that we think that everyone would benefit from having that information, we'll send that out prior to the meeting as well, so that everybody is equally informed prior to the meeting. Next slide, please. So we used these questions the last time we talked about the handbook and the bylaws. So I went through them, thought they were all relevant. So if you have any questions about the handbook or the bylaws, happy to answer those. Again, as I mentioned, the basic rules for commissions are consistent across all of the commissions. That there are a few things that are specific, I think, to the Planning Commission. And then if you have any questions about voting or motions or presentations, again, I encourage you to look, read through those bylaws that I sent out earlier today. It's always good to review, and you never know when it's going to come in handy. You know, some odd topic or some odd situation might come up in the Planning Commission. I know a couple of times I've been feeling like, oh, I'm a little bit stumped, I don't know what to do, and one of the other commissioners will pipe up and say, oh, well, in our bylaws it says, you know, XYZ, and that's always helpful. And then this was from last year, but if I think we're all very accustomed to these virtual meetings. But last year we were concerned if there were any particular challenge with virtual meetings. So that's my last slide. I don't know if there's any questions or comments or items for discussion that anyone would like to have.
Does anybody have any questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
We really appreciate your service, and I know I'm here at every meeting, but when staff comes to meeting, the Planning Commission is always so respectful and so helpful, and we really do enjoy working with all of you, and we hope that the materials that we present to you are all very clear and concise. And we, of course, are always thankful for Liz Medina, our Planning Commission Secretary, who keeps us all in line, and she's the one who puts all those materials together and gets them out to you on Friday, usually on Friday evening before the meeting. I learned that today. That was new. I didn't realize it was in the bylaws that our meeting materials are required to be out at least 5 days prior to the meeting. So we usually always do it on Friday, but sometimes we get things out on Monday, but not too often.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for planning director or city attorney on the training?
I have a question.
Commissioner Wasti.
Thank you. When we were talking of a commissioner who has to recuse himself or herself or abstain, or a conflict of interest. An example here will be, let's say that there's a church I go to or a temple I go to. Some development comes before the planning commission for that particular church or temple. And I know all those people, they are my friends. So what do I do in such a situation?
That's another great question, Commissioner. So generally with conflicts of interest and recusals and abstentions, there are certain conflicts of interest that are required under FPPC regulations. So that's sort of like the Political Reform Act, and then the Fair Practices Political Commission it has guidelines that require recusal. So for example, if you have a financial interest in a certain business, or you live within 500 feet of a certain of the subject of the development, you're required to disclose that conflict and recuse. In the case of what you brought up, is if you have friends that are part of a project, that's not a required recusal. The issue there is more if there's a bias, and that's something that's determined by the commissioner. So if the commissioner feels that he can make a decision that's unbiased in spite of the fact that he has a relationship with, it's a non-financial relationship, it's a non-financial interest, it's still, in general, it's still something that can be disclosed. But that does not require recusal. And then when it comes to abstentions, the main difference with recusal and abstentions, as Ned mentioned, is when you recuse yourself from the entire item. So you're not going to participate in the hearing. You don't hear what the applicant has to say, and you don't make any deliberations. With abstentions, you're going to hear the item presented. You can ask questions, and sometimes commissioners can't decide, so they'll abstain. And under our bylaws, you have to you're required to state a reason. It's not a requirement under the state laws, but it's something that we can put in our records as to why, and that just protects the city. It gives more of an administrative record as to why someone didn't vote. But I mean, I hope that answers your question. I think with respect to personal relationships, to the extent that it's not a financial conflict of interest, those are always issues that if the commissioner can continue to make objective decisions, then he or she is not prohibited from participating in the matter.
Thank you.
See, attorney, I actually had, I think you might have remembered there was actually one specific one that myself, and back then it was Commissioner Alcorn. So there was a sign at Christ Community Church. I attend that church. So just as an example, so obviously you go to a church, you know a lot of people, but I had no financial vested interest, so I was allowed to remain, as part of the, on the planning, during the deliberations, and I was able to sit. However, at that time, Commissioner Alcorn, he had to recuse himself because he works at the church and he gets paid by the church. So that's just to give you an example, a very specific one that actually happened.
That's exactly right, Chair. And so generally, commissioners, for the ones that are newer, generally, like if you'll all get the item prior to the meeting, and so what commissioners generally do is they can email our office. So they'll email me and they'll say like, oh, here's the facts of my situation. Like, do I have a conflict? So that's generally the first step. If you have any questions or you think you may have a conflict, it's important that you contact Ned or myself, and then we can look at the issue prior to the meeting, and then we'll make that determination as to whether disclosure is required, recusal is required, and if it's not required, then you're free to proceed. As in Chair's case, even though recusal was not required, I think Chair, you might have disclosed that there was, you had a relationship, for example, but then we determined that there was no financial conflict and therefore you weren't required to recuse. So sort of that kind of language that we can disclose. And so that's generally the protocol that we've been, working with.
So does any other commissioners have any questions or comments or?
I do have one thing. It jogged in my memory that last bullet point when we talked about virtual meetings, and just by way of update, next week the council will resume having what we call hybrid meetings, where the council is meeting together in the chambers, but for the most part, the presentations and any public comment will be taken remotely or online. There is the capability for the Planning Commission to have those types of meetings as well, since we meet in the chambers. We don't currently have plans to go back to the meeting in person in the chambers, but it will likely occur within the next few months as we continue to monitor the COVID situation. So for the time being, we'll continue to have our meetings via Zoom. And with that in mind too, I'll take the opportunity just to let you know that we don't currently have any items on our agenda for the second meeting in February or the first meeting in March. So we'll take a little bit of a hiatus, but we are aware of 2 items that will be coming forward to you in the second meeting in March. So just as you look ahead on your calendars, if you can plan that your Wednesday evening at the end of February and early March will be open. And then I believe our next meeting was at March 19th. Liz?
I think 23rd. Oh, wait, no, I apologize.
No, you're right, it is.
The 23rd, yes.
Yeah, the fourth Wednesday in March is the 23rd. So that will likely be our next meeting.
Okay, great. So it sounds like I guess cancellations will be sent out for late February. Okay.
Liz will take care of that.
Okay. If there's, I see you, Vice Chair, but if there is for some reason, we do have that second meeting in February for some reason. I wanted to let you all know that I will not be there. So just, just early heads up, just in case. But having said that, Vice Chair Ciardella.
He's not even taking us to Hawaii with him. Yeah, I think that's terrible.
Let's send us a card.
Anyway, I was just thinking that first meeting in March, since we're not going to have a commission meeting, some of the commissioners, or all of our planning commissioners, and Ned and you too, Liz, we all ought to go out to dinner. It might be an idea, and kick it around, see what you guys think.
Is that a social occasion, Martin, that's
It sure is.
we're able to do for?
we can talk offline, Ned, in the event that you guys schedule something and we can take a look. But of course, it should be fine. I mean, to the extent that it's just a social event.
As long as we don't talk shop, right?
I will talk to Liz too. Since you brought that up, I've brought this up a couple of times as I got here, and this is separate from dinner as a social event, but if we wanted to start a little bit early, we could note it as a meeting. And I've talked about taking I don't know if we can get the bus from the city van from the Recreation Services Department. We could go around and look at some of the projects. That gets a little bit tricky because as a public meeting, if members of the public want to go with us, then I think we have to accommodate them. Martin, is that how the Brown Act works? Or anyway, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, between now and March, and it might not be March. I think dinner is a great idea, and if there was another time when we got together, we do have some very interesting projects going on, and sometimes it's fun to get out and actually boots on the ground and see what's happening in different parts of the city where I know every time I drive around Milpitas, I see something new that it wasn't there. I'm watching very carefully the Chick-fil-A going up because I'm anxious to have my chicken sandwich, but there, the other, I mentioned the Robeson Home project going on up in the north part of the city. That's been a very interesting project. And then some of the large projects down in the metro area, I think would be interesting to visit those as well.
Anyone else have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, does Liz get to join us for dinner? I like that. I make a motion for the dinner.
I second the motion. Yeah, I would really like to get to know everybody aside from, meetings and little faces in boxes.
Yes, exactly.
So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. One other thing I wanted to note, I did see that on our Planning Commission website, and Planning Director, if you're able to talk about it, I did see that the vacancy was filled for this 7th spot.
Yes, and I probably at our next meeting in March, before at the beginning of the meeting, we'll make arrangements for our city clerk to swear in the 7th member. It's an appointment, but it's somewhat of a reappointment. The vice chair will recall when Zaya Mosin was on the commission. So she will be returning to the commission in March. We look forward to having her. And I thought you were going to mention on the Planning Commission page, and this is an item for Liz too, but we do have a Planning Commission. Yeah, you knew what I was going to ask, the Planning Commission page, and we usually include a photograph of each of the commissioners. So Liz will reach out to the ones for whom we do not have a photo, and if you have one that we can send, or we can take one at City Hall when City Hall is reopens next week, then we'll include that on the web page.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna ask about that, just in the temporary, it was just white spots on the.
I was thinking we could hire a cartoonist to draw a character. We'd rather have the real photograph.
Okay.
Agree.
So through the chair, just to note, I think there's an attendee. We want to consider the public, even though it's just a training session. They're still allowed to comment if they would like.
Okay. I know we didn't close the public. I mean, we didn't have a public forum on here because this is not a public forum item. So is that something we can just go ahead, just, out of courtesy to allow him to speak, or?
That's correct. So special meetings, generally, we only, the Brown Act only requires that if it's a special meeting that the commenter comment on, the agendized item, but it's the discretion of the chair if they'd like to hear comments generally.
All right. At the discretion of the chair, I can set the time for it as well, correct?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So I'll, for this, I'll just allow, since I think we're closing up, I'll do a minute and a half. Is that sufficient of time, City Attorney?
Yeah, there's one commenter that's, I know typically it's 3 minutes, but I don't, it's at your discretion, Chair.
Okay.
And the Commission.
All right.
At this time, yeah.
Yeah. At my discretion, I will go ahead and
Chair,
yes.
please note that IT said it's only in 1 minute increments,
Okay.
the timer.
Then I will make it, I'll make it 2 minutes then, just out of courtesy. So Ms. Medina, it looks like we have one person want to do one public comment. I will allow 2 minutes.
Yes, so we have Urvish Kumar Mehta, and I will unmute him to speak.
All right, Mr. Mehta, you have welcome to the Planning Commission. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the respective commissioners, vice chair, chair, as well as city staff. Again, I wanted to acknowledge that the presentation, and as a part of a special meeting, that the entire procedural, as well as what has been explained by the the Planning Commission city attorney, has been narrated very well, and also to emphasize on that, how the parliamentary procedure works, and that reminds me of the chair Steve's methodology of implementing those methods, and as well as taking the deliberation as it is needed, and also providing the opportunity to the commission to overview and as well as detail out as a part of what planning commission is required by laws, by open government bylaws to enlarge on. So certainly there are quite a few things that has been covered. I wanted to emphasize on one aspect is that if the Planning Commission can also register themselves to the FCC, the Federal Election Commission, and get the ID for the commission, as the votes are going to be electronically registered by registering Planning Commission to the FEC as well. Thank you very much for consideration of comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mehta. Okay. Ms. Medina, or any other further comments, or any other members of the public wanting to speak on this item?
No, Chair, there are no other participants in the queue for public comment.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney, I don't need to close the public forum, correct, since we didn't have one?
That's correct. Yeah, there's no public hearing. It's not a public hearing. It's just if someone wants to comment on an agenda item, that
okay,
they can, but so there's no need to close anything.
All right, thank you. Thank you, City Attorney. All right, next item on the agenda is adjournment. May I get a motion for adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I got a motion from Commissioner Medina Ashby. May I have a second?
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Albana. I won't do roll call vote. I'll do all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Commissioner Wasti, you're not opposed, right? I just want to be clear. All right. No opposition. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good.
Good evening. Have a good
See
night.
ya.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey, have a good vacation, Bill.
Thank you.
I
All
don't
right.
see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.